So we're starting a winter's man, and I understand that we're going to be Oisik and Hilchos Shabbos. So one of the most fundamental sugyas, one of the most lamdisha discussions regarding Mלאכת Shabbos is the definition of Zorע and Vebishol. Of all the Lamed Tes Malachos, these two stand apart. They're unique, they're different, and they have something in common. What they have in common is the fact that in these two malachos, a person cannot really achieve his goal and his objective with his own koyach. All he can do is start a process. And the process will come into fruition by koyches hateva. There's no such a thing as oifa and mevashel biyodov. You could only put the pot on the stove, on the fire, put the dough into the tanur, into the oven, and you will achieve your goal by natural forces, by heat. So you cannot make a tree grow with your hands, with your own koyach. You could only plant a seed, and nature needs to take care of all the rest. So that is what Zorע and Vebishol have in common. And the focus of today's shir is, are they the same or are they nevertheless different, even though they do seem to have something in common? Because HaChoresh v'HaZorע, HaKoitzer v'HaBoirer, Koiser v'Moichik, Boine v'Soiser, Toifer v'Korea, all the other malachos, you achieve your objective directly, immediately and directly. Zorع and Vebishol are different. Are they the same or not? And this is a huge machlokes between Gedolei ha'achronim. And many of the greatest achronim took part in this machlokes. What is puzzling is two fundamental halachas, both of them beyond doubt. Regarding Vebishol, Shabbos Daf Gimel Amud Beis, there's a boy in the Gemara and a lengthy discussion. Hidvik pas betanur b'Shabbos etira lo l'redoisa oiloi. Redias a pas, which is taking the bread out of the oven, is a Shabbos. So the suffix in the Gemara is, if a person put pas into the tanur and he's over a malachas oifa, we're chazal matir to take it out, to salvage himself from a malachah d'oraisa, from iser koras and skila, where they matir a shavus to save a person from a malachah d'oraisa. So what is obvious from the sugya, beyond any doubt, is if he takes the pas out of the tanur, he is saved. He's saved because he didn't do a malachah. At the end of the day, he wasn't toifer. He wasn't mevashel. His malachah didn't come to fruition. On the other hand, regarding Zorع, it's a Mishnah in Shvius that there's a time lapse between putting the seeds in the ground and klitas hazera, until those seeds are niklat and they start to develop. I speak a proper English, but sometimes I don't know what the word is when we're dealing with specific scientific terms. So in Lashon Kodesh, there's a nevet, a shlav of nevita. So when you plant a seed, and the seed is nourished by the earth and by the minerals and by water, it produces a nevet, which ultimately in due time will turn into a root. So according to the Mishnah Shvius, there's a machlokes how much time it'll take for the seed starting to develop. Is it 3 days, is it a week, or 2 weeks? But it's never Shabbos. It's always after Shabbos. So obviously, regarding Zerah, the fact that the melacha comes to fruition after Shabbos doesn't pater. There still is a chiyuv Zerah. Would we say the same regarding mevashel? Person puts dough, pass into the tanner on Shabbos, but it won't achieve krivas ponim till Motzei Shabbos. Puts a pot on the stove on the fire Shabbos, but the time it'll be yad soledis if it's liquid, or machal ben drisoi if it's solid, will be Motzei Shabbos. He put the pot on the fire few minutes before the shki or before it says that Yechavim. His malacha will not come into fruition till Motzei Shabbos. If we compare mevasel to Zerah, he should be chayiv. On the other hand, if a person is with Zerah and then he wants to do tshuva, so he collects the seeds, takes them out of the earth where he placed them with that pattern. So if we compare and say mevashel and Zerah are the same, then we should be mechadish two halachas. Just like by mevashel, hidbik pas betano v'rodo as a pas, and he took the pas out of the tanner, his potol, we would say the same by Zerah. You planted seeds, and then the person does tshuva. If he takes the seeds out of the earth, then he's potter. On the other hand, just like by Zerah, even though klitas azera would only be Motzei Shabbos, that he's chayiv, so if the food stuff would only be cooked or baked, Motzei Shabbos, he still would be chayiv. Is that a logical conclusion? So yes, many achronim maintain mevashel and Zerah are the same, and both these conclusions are correct. If you collect those seeds and you take them back, you're potter, just like Radias Apas patters oifei. If the food is cooked Motzei Shabbos chayev, just like Zerah is chayev afar pishaklitas azera Motzei Shabbos. That is the opinion of the Rashash. I'm a chosed of the Rashash. The Goas Rashash are amazing. He's a big yashrin, even though in this sugi I disagree with him. Goas Rashash on the Mishnah Shabbos Tafayin Gimel. B'tzafnas paneach the Rogat Shavar. Hilchos Shabbos Perik Tes Alocha Aleph. Chelkas Yoyav, twice in his sefer. Madura Kama, Orachaim Simen Yud, Madura Tinyonen Simen Yud Gimel. On the other hand, the Minchas Chinuch and the Avnei Nezer, two giants, disagree. And they argue it doesn't make sense. These two conclusions are atarte de satre. If Radias Apas patters a person, that proves that the malacha isn't, the culmination of the malacha is not when you put the pot on the fire, but you put the bread into the oven. If Radias Apas patters, it proves that the malacha is the bishul, the afir. So how could it be chayev if the bishul and the afir were Motzei Shabbos? Motzei Shabbos, there is no isur of bishul and afir. So the Minchas Chinuch also twice in his sefer, Moisech Shabbos Malacha Zorea, Mitzvah Reish Tzadik Ches, that is the mitzvah of Isur Asiyas Malacha Ani Yom Tov. So the Minchas Chinuch voices his opinion twice, and also the Eglei Tal and Malacha Zorea, To the best of my memory, it's also in Shuvas Avnei Nezer, but I didn't look it up today. So the Hilchos Yoav was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer. One could say a Talmud Chaver. He saw himself as a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer. But in the many letters the Avnei Nezer writes to the Hilchos Yoav, he doesn't write Talmidi. The Avnei Nezer saw him as a contemporary. So he was a Talmud Chaver. And he has a machlokes with the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer, the Minchas Chinuch feel these two conclusions can't live together. They're a tata d'satra. In their understanding, if the Melacha comes to fruition Motzei Shabbos, it's just like the Melacha never came to fruition. What would be the difference in Rodo Sapas or Shapas Nefer Motzei Shabbos? So we must say that Oifa, Mevashel, and Zor'a are not the same. They bear some similarity, but by halachic definition, they are not the same. And Melacha Zor'a culminates, is finished the moment you put the seeds into earth. Melacha Zor'a is over. And therefore, according to their opinion, Lakita Zera, collecting those seeds won't pater you. It's over. You are over on the Melacha, you're chayiv once you planted those seeds. And that is why you're chayiv, even if Klita Zera is Motzei Shabbos. Regarding Oifa, just like Rediya Sapas paters an Adam, he will also be potter if Machal ben Dresoi, Yad Soledes, Krimas Pnei Hapas, those are the three definitions of the Shir, Oifa Mevashel, B'Yovish Ubelach. If that was achieved Motzei Shabbos, potter. So the Hilchos Yoav obviously felt uncomfortable having a machlokes with his great Rebbe, the Avnei Nezer. So it's just an interesting historical fact. The Hilchos Yoav turned to two of the greatest Gedolim of his day and age, asking their opinion regarding this shaila. The Maharsham, Brejan HaRav, Chela Gimel, Siman Ayin Ches, and Rameir Arak, Imre Yosha, Chelak Aleph, Kuf Tzadik Beis. These two were great Gedolim in Galicia. Rameir Arak was younger than the Masham and the Hilchos Yoav, but he was a great Ilui. And even though he was younger than the Hilchos Yoav, it's interesting the Hilchos Yoav turned to him to hear his opinion. And these two Gedolim, in their tshuvas to the Hilchos Yoav part, the Marsham agrees with the Rashash, Hilchos Yoav Tzafnas Paneach. Oifer and Mevasha are the same. So there must be a difference between Gemar Melacha b'Motzei Shabbos and a scenario in which there was no Gemar Melacha at all, because he collected the seeds and he took the pas out of the tanner. So the Marsham sides with the Hilchos Yoav, the Imre Yosha sides with the Minchas Chinuch, and the Eglei Tal, the Avnei Nezer. There must be a difference between Oifa, Mevashel on one hand, Zor'a on the other. I don't want to go into the sugya of Chotzer Shir b'Malechas Shabbos. Maybe we'll have a separate shir on Chotzer Shir. It's a huge discussion. And in the sugya of Chotzer Shir b'Shabbos, I also have Gevaldige Chidush. But what we are discussing has nothing to do with Chotzer Shir, neither with Chotzer Malacha. The question we are discussing is, how do we define these malachas? HaZor'a v'HaMevashel. Is just starting the process, the malacha, and that is the entire malacha. What happens later isn't relevant. You are over the moment you put the pot on the stove, the seed into the earth, or no. Is the malacha the goal, the end product, the objective? Is that the malacha? That is the question we are discussing. What is interesting to note, I quoted the opinions of 7 Gedolim. The Rashash, Marsham, Chelkes Yoev, Tzafras Manech on one hand, their opinion is these two malachas are exactly the same. So what we find by Mevashel must be relevant by Zorea. Redias Apas Paters, same would go regarding Likitas Azera. Klitas Azera Motzei Shabbos is Chayev, the same would go to Mevashel. Three Gedolim that have a different opinion. Zorea and Mevashel are not the same. Because if they are the same, these two conclusions are atar de Satra. And those are the Minchas Chinuch, the Egletar, and the Imri Yosha. All these Gedolim were later Achronim. There are two early sources, and these two early sources, which go back 400 years and more, also split. Halachas Ketanis. Mahari Chagiz. He was the Rebbe of the Pri Chodesh, going back more than 400 years. Halachas Ketanis Reish Samach Vav says there is a difference between Oifen and Zorea, Mevashel and Zorea. They're not the same. So Halachas Ketanis is the predecessor of the Minchas Chinuch, the Egletal, and the Imri Yosha. Maharam ben Chaviv, Kapois Tmorim, Shalosh Tshuvas Koil Godoil, he says, like the Chelkas Yoev, like the Rashash. So let me share with you my opinion. I totally side with the Minchas Chinuch, the Egletal, and the Imri Yosha. These two conclusions are a clear Tarta de Satra, cannot be reconciled. So how does the Chelkas Yoev explain the difference? How does he explain Redias Apas Paters? Hidbik Pas Betana. If he managed to take that dough out of the oven before Gemara Afia, Poto. But on the other hand, if the Gemara Afia was Motzei Shabbos Chayiv, what's the explanation? So the Chelkas Yoev says, there's a difference between a situation in which he did the malacha. At the end of the day, he achieved his goal. But if he did Redias Apas, and there never was a fear, there never was a bishul, then Loi Na'ases Machshavtoi. I think that's a mistake. Loi Na'ases Machshavtoi is only when the Etzem Maisa wasn't done in a way, in the fashion he planned it. But if he didn't achieve his objective and his goal, that's not Loi Na'ases Machshavtoi. That's not Loi Na'ases Machshavtoi. Loi Na'ases Machshavtoi is Zorak letzad zeh v'holach letzad acher. Nischaven lizroik l'reshus zu v'zorak l'reshus acheres. Nischaven lo yitzi lefonav v'bolo la'achoirav. He didn't perform the malach in the fashion he planned. But if we assume that the malacha is just putting the pot on the fire, putting the dough in the oven, and that is why he's chayiv, even if the afiyah and the bishul were moitzoi Shabbos, then the fact sherodo asapas is not Loi Na'ases Machshavtoi. He didn't achieve his objective, but that doesn't matter. So I don't really see how we could differentiate and argue and say, collecting the seed, taking the pas out of the tanner, taking the pot off the fire, patters, and if the afiyah and bishul happen Motzei Shabbos, he's chayiv. How could that be? If the end product is the malacha, how could he be chayiv on Motzei Shabbos? If the malacha is just starting the process, why would he be poter al yedei Redias Apas or Lekitas Azera? I don't see how these two could fit in together. And therefore, la'aniyas daiti, the other opinion is the correct one, the minchas chinuch, the eglei tal, the imri yosha, and halachas ketanis. Halachas ketanis is a very unique and interesting sefer. On one hand, one of the greatest gedolim going back more than 400 years. The Pri Chodesh was his Talmud, Mari Chagas. But it's a very strange sefer. Very strange sforos, conclusions. And I was always baffled by this sefer. Until I realized in the Haggadah to the sefer he writes that these weren't shilas that he was actually asked. And the tshuvas weren't written halacha l'maisa. These were chidushim, he said, Shabbos in the afternoon. And let me tell you from my experience, bring people to the shul Shabbos afternoon for a shir is not an easy feat, especially winter, short Shabbosim. So you need really to say interesting chidushim to get people out of their beds after the chont and the kugel and bring them to shul Shabbos afternoon. And maybe that explains some of the chidushim we find in halachas ketanis. But that is just a general comment. So in Siman Reish Samach Vav, halachas ketanis, chelek aleph, the halachas ketanis explains what is the difference between oifa and zur'a. And why is it that by zur'a we say, the moment you planted that seed, your malacha is over. You were over on malacha zur'a. What happens from now on is irrelevant, whether the malacha comes to fruition or not. Whether that seed will ultimately become a tree, will it bring forth fruit or vegetable, doesn't matter. Just planting the seed is a malacha. Masha ein kein oifa umevashel. Malachas mevashel is only when that food is ra'ui la'achila. By liquid, yatzoledes, solids, machal ben dreisoy, pas, karma, pnei apas. His argument is, I'm a vassal darkoi lahogis, and that's megis. So when a woman puts a pot on the fire, or a man, when we were young, well, men barely went into the kitchen. Today it's a different world. I see my children, my sons-in-law, tremendous Talmid Chachamim, but they know what a kitchen looks like. Changing world. So halachas ketanas, Mari Chagas argues, usually when you put a pot on the fire, you stir the pot. So you're still engaged in bishul. And that is why we don't define malachas bishul just starting the process, putting the pot on the fire. Darkoi shaloilam, you check it, you add some salt if needed, you stir it, megis, and that is why Gemara bishul is only the Gemara bishul when the food becomes fitting for consumption. Mashen ken zur'a. I disagree. Why would that make a difference? Darakei lahogis. Why would it make a difference? Even if he's not megis, at the end of the day, it's gonna come, it's gonna cook, it's gonna boil. How about oifa? Oifa, there's nothing to do. Once you put the dough in the oven, there's nothing else you can do. You just wait for Gemara Afir. On the other hand, Zur'a, you need to tend to that plant. You need to water it. So why would it be different than Mevashel? So once again, my opinion is firmly on the side of the Minchas Chinuch, Eglei Tal, and Halachas Ketanis. Velo mita'amei. I think the difference is so poshut, so obvious. You just can't escape it. It's not the same at all. And the reason Mavasal is different than Zur'a is twofold. Immediacy and the fact that it's predestined and predetermined. When you put pas in the tanur or a pot on the fire, you know exactly how long it'll take. Gemara Fi and Gemara Bishul. Depends what type of foodstuffs. Depends how big the fire is, how intense the heat. But it is fundamental science what will happen. It's not the same when you plant a seed. The result is not of your doing, totally bidei shamayim. So when you put a pot on the stove or bread into the oven, the result is immediate. And when I say immediate, it could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, but relatively short time. Not days, not weeks, not years. So why do some achronim think that the culmination of Zerah is Klitas Azera? To the person, Klitas Azera has no meaning at all. He couldn't care less. He doesn't see what's happening within that seed, what biology is doing. To him, the result is the fruit and the vegetable. That'll take months, maybe many years. So how could we say that is the essence of the malacha? That's ridiculous. The essence of the malacha cannot be something which is years down the line or months down the line. I don't know why the Achronim speak about Klitas Azera. Klitas Azera means nothing. In the eyes of the planter, Klitas Azera has no mashmos, no significance. So the result he wishes to achieve by planting is the fruit, is the vegetable. That is months or years down the line. And there is no way he could know whether this malacha will ever come to fruition. Many of the seeds never develop. And it is impossible to know in advance will they develop or not. But when you put a pot on the fire, if nobody is going to take that pot off or extinguish the fire, yes, it's predestined and predetermined beyond doubt. You will achieve the result. And you will achieve the result very shortly. And that is why, to me, it's a pshitas. Melecha Zorea Kishmoy Keinhu. It's only planting the seed. If Melecha Zorea would be achieving your goal, a person would never be chayiv by Melecha Zorea. We need Aiden that'll testify exactly where did he plant this seed. And those Adam cannot move away from that place for a year or 2 years or 3 years till the tree develops. Otherwise, how could they testify? How do you know that this tree is from that zera that he planted? So how could a person ever be chayav mishum zoreya? So to me, Poshet betachlis pshitis, that mevashel and zereya are not the same at all. And gemar malecha zereya is hanochas hazera. And that is why it makes no difference whether klitas hazera is Shabbos or in the middle of the week. Makes no difference when those vegetables and fruits will come to be. Gemara malochas hanochas hazera. And therefore, collecting those seeds won't pater him, There's no way for him to do tshuva. He could do tshuva and say al chait, but he cannot invalidate the malacha. There's no way back. The moment he planted those seeds, chayav mishum zaraya. Mevashel is different. Mevashel is about the result. And Hagdoras HaMalacha, Hagdoras Maleches Mevashel is Tikkun HaOichel B'choyim Hu'esh. 4 words. That is the Hagdorah of Mevashel. Tikkun HaOichel B'choyim Hu'esh. And therefore, you're not over Mevashel by putting a pot on the fire or putting bread in the stove. You're over Mevashel only when that bread will be baked, when the tafshil will be cooked, when the water will boil, at least yad soledes. And therefore, hidbek pas betano, the boy is a tirela lerdoiso, ali deredias a pas poto. And if the bishul was Motzoi Shabbos, potter as well, because Motzoi Shabbos is the same as never. And just like Azorei Chayev, Afal Pi Shazera Niklat Motzoi Shabbos, Azorei Chayev, Afal Pi Sheliket et Azroim, doesn't patter him. So yes, Zorei and Mevashel have something in common, but what they have in common is irrelevant, doesn't determine the Mahus HaMalacha. When we're dealing with the essence of HaMalacha, they're not the same. What they have in common is, yes, by these 2 malachas, the person just starts a process. And it is the laws of nature which bring that process into fruition. Different laws. But dealing with the essence, with the mahus, with the hagdoras hamalacha, they're not the same. Hazorei chayev mishas anochas hazera. There's no other way to see it. Klitas hazera isn't relevant. There are many stages after klitas hazera, which could still make his efforts futile. Yes, sometimes the seed will give forth a nevet. The nevet will develop to a root, but still there are so many reasons that could go, so many things that could go wrong and maybe wouldn't develop. So Zarei and Mevashel are not the same. In a previous year, we spoke about Grama by Melacha's Shabbos. And we brought many examples. The Gemara deals with Gram Kibui. We brought an example, the Machlokes, the Magen Avraham and Even is a Gram Tchina, when we have a water mill, a mill in which the grinding stones are moved by running water, rivers, waterfalls, power plants. Take advantage of the awesome force of running water. And some of the Achronim want to prove that Groma by Shabbos is Chayev from Mevashel. Mevashel is only a Groma. Zorea. According to today's Shir, Zorea proves nothing. Because by Zorea, Gemara Malacha is just planting the seed. That is all the Malacha. And you're Chayev regardless of whether those seeds developed or not. Even Mevashel is not a Raya. Because by Mevashel, in a way, he's a Groma. But on the other hand, Bahochi Chayve Rachmona. No other way. There is no other way. Letakein Oichel B'choyim Hu'esh. Only by starting the process. By putting together what is needed. You need fire. Sometimes you need an additional agent, like by Bishul. By Afia, you need fire. And you need an oven. You need an oven to capture the heat. And ultimately to achieve your goal, to bake the bread. So, just to be Mesakem today's Shir, this is a fascinating discussion. 2 malachas that are unique, stand apart, different than all the others. two halachas. One is found by Zorah and not by Mavashel. The other is found by Mavashel, not by Zorah. Taking the bed out of the oven, patters on Mavashel. We find no source. Would the same apply to Zorah, collecting the seed? Klitas Azera Motzoi Shabbos Chayev. Would the same apply to Mavashel? If the bishul was actually achieved Motzoi Shabbos, we find no source to this shaila in the Gemara or the Rishonim. And that's the big machlokes between Gedolei Achronim. Do we say these malachas are the same? And we need to find a way to reconcile these two halachas and differentiate between a situation in which our objective was achieved Motzoi Shabbos and is chayev, or that our goal wasn't achieved at all and never came into fruition and is potul. That is one approach. The other approach, which I try to explain, and that is my opinion, is because these two halachas are a total contradiction, and there's no way to reconcile them. There's no way to explain why Rodo esapas poto v'mapas nefer b'mitzvah Shabbos chayev. So the conclusion must be that Zorah and Mavashel are not the same. And I hope I explained why they're not the same. They cannot be the same. It's impossible to be the same. And the difference is, by Bishul, the result is predetermined and predestined. It must come to be, unless someone interferes and changes the basic mitzias. It's not the same by Zorah. And the other point of difference is by Zorah, how do we define the result? The ultimate result is privierik, and that's way down the line. And that is not a direct result of Masa Hayodam. It depends on so many factors that are B'dei Shemai. So Seder Zroim is emunos, and Chazal say that the farmer needs to have emunah. He plants the seed and he davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should give water and should bring forth fruit. So this just once again stresses, unlike a Mavashel, in which if he does what he does, muftach lo, that the result will come to be. Lo kach b'Zorah. And therefore, in my opinion, that is the fundamental difference between Mavashel and Zorah. Mlechas v'bishul is tikkun u'oichel. Tikkun u'oichel is not when you put the pot on the fire. Tikkun u'oichel will be when you achieve your goal. And Gemara Bishul has 3 different Agdoras. Krimis apas, oifa, machla ben dresoi betavshel, mayim, yad soledes. But whatever it is, the malacha is only tikkun hu oichel, not the same by Zorah. Hanochas azera, that is Gemara malacha. So this is my opinion in this big machlokes bein gedolei achronim, and it's just fascinating to go through those tshuvas, and what I gave you is a very brief synopsis. So one of the chedushim I shared with you is I don't think that any of these achronim quote the first 2 sources, the earliest sources, which are halachas ketanas on one hand, Marichages and Maram ben Chaviv in Shalos HaTshuvas Kol Godel on the other hand. And it's just interesting that these 2 early Gedolim also have 2 different opinions. One side with the Hilchos Yoav, and the other side with his great Rebbe, the Avnei Nezer. So this is our shir today. I apologize, it's a bit shorter than what we usually have because I still have another shir tonight. I just want to take this opportunity again to wish you all a gesunter winter. So every year after Simchas Torah, we say a gesunter winter. In these difficult times, Many things have totally different tone and meaning. So I said before Rosh Hashanah, this time around when we say Tich L'Shona V'Kira L'Yisei, Toch L'Shona V'Berach L'Yisei, it has so much more meaning. When we wish each other a Gezinter Winter, it has so much more meaning. To my dismay, Asher Yagornu Ba, I wish I would be wrong. To my dismay and my profound sadness, I was right along this entire pandemic. I was worried a month ago that it's not over in New York either. And I'm extremely worried. It might get much worse than it is right now. 3 months ago, in Yesod, we thought it's over. And I plead with people and I said, it's not over. So the government is so proud of itself. The Seger worked. And I tell you, it didn't work. And it could be worse than it is today. I think we finally need to realize the only way to overcome this is really by having the entire community do the same. As long as we're fragmented, it'll always be some of us affecting the others. We must realize Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh. And it is only if we all follow the rules that we could finally overcome this pandemic. So I just want to wish all of you a Gezinter Winter. Kadosh Baruch Hu should watch over all of us. As careful as you are, you need Siyata Dishmaya. I get up every day in the morning. I never said Moida Anu with so much kavana as I do today. Get up in the morning. First thing, I take a deep breath. Am I breathing properly? Do I have kotza neshima? Am I feeling well? Ani memashmesh es kol eivorai. And you're feeling well. Ilu pinu molei shiru kiyam einonim speaking loides. I'm not arrogant. I don't take credit for the fact that I'm well. I'm the only one of 7 brothers that did not have corona as of today. And I'm not sure I won't have it, as careful as I am. So we need to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every day of good health. Those of us that had corona and had a mild case and are out of the woods, they especially need to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I wish that a refuah shalema to all of those that are still struggling. Take care, do your hishtadlus, and to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do all the rest. A gezinter winter, a good gebencht yor, and I look forward to sharing many more divrei Torah with you.